everybody, I'm Freerider2142 and today I'd like to talk to you about my Orca, how I fly it and how I set it up with my controls and reactive thrusters and things like that. Um, to start with, I'm going to talk about these little reactive thrusters. You'll see these engines all over, basically in the front, on the right side, left side. These give you yaw control. They're inverted from each other, but they're also in the back, so there's two, always one in the front, one in the back. The same goes for pitch, here and here. They also exist in the bottom, and of course roll, from here to here. That's all set up to group activate 8. We'll talk about everything when we're taking it out for a flight. I'll also talk about all my controls and how my controls are set. Now, other things that I'd like to talk about is the gyro. I have a gyro on this thing and I use it quite a lot, specifically in landings, taking off and keeping her stable. It's pretty much dead center, or at least a little to the back from the center of mass, so it'll try to keep the nose leveled. That has to do with the tail and everything. We're not going to go too much into that, but you'll see that the pitch, roll, and yaw are all set to 0. Gyroscopic speed is 100%, gyroscopic stability is 150, activation group 7. Didn't touch any of these because they're not interesting, they're all set to 0. It has lights and it has a very good HUD for specific things to see. But that was the basics of these reactive thrusters and how they set up. Now I want to go a little deeper by showing you exactly the input controller and the engine. Now the engines are set to times 60 power, which sounds kind of ridiculous, I know, but if you'll go into the input controllers, you'll see that they're set to 0.05, and they're all set to this amount, and that is to have immediate control over the amount of thrust that is given. It doesn't need to build up engine throttle as it goes, like you set it up to 1. So the reactive thrusters react very fast to everything that you do. So from here, we're going to go outside. When you're starting her up, you'll notice the HUD is going to look something like this. Group Activate 8 is, of course, the little thrusters that you see all over her. Other things that are important is it has a fully articulated tail. So all your yaw, roll, and pitch controls in forward flight are all done by the tail. She's very aerodynamically stable at speeds just above 75 miles per hour. It'll fly under its wings, basically. Other things that I want to point out is how I control the Orca. I'm going to start with pitch and roll. Of course, I have a joystick, so pitch and roll is controlled with my joystick. Throttle and all those, I have a throttle. And I have pedals that control my yaw. They also control my brakes, so I can set them up as much as I want with my right brake pedal. So I can have it exactly how much I press on it with my foot, basically. And I also have trim set to my left foot, so I can adjust that. I'll go into explanation exactly how much that and what this trim does when we get into the cockpit. So this is basically my control system. I control it with both my hands and feet at all times. If you go into the HUD, you'll notice a few things. First things first, you'll see that you have your engine angle indicator. You have a 90-degree vertical line so you can set up the angle of the engine straight down, and this main angle is controlled by your VTOL control. It'll give you maneuverability and rotation for the engines from fully horizontal all the way up to 10 degrees forward when it's all the way down, and that is to have the ability to hover pointing your nose down, which I'll show when we're in the air. The other control that moves the engine pylons is the trim. It doesn't move backwards, it'll only move forwards in one direction. And that is to have better control when you're flying to slow down while the engines are set to a specific angle. So you set your engines with your VTOL, and then if you want to slow down or change their angle forward to hover with your nose down, you can use your trim. And once you move that all the way to the center or all the way down, it'll bring it back to where the VTOL is set it up. Activation groups wise, you have activation group 1 is the lighting system. So you have position lights, warning lights, you can see all those things. Activation group 2, this is something that is unique to this Orca. Other Orcas of mine do not have this, and that is an afterburner indicated by this little yellow blinking light. Activation group 3, 4, 5, and 6 do not have any settings to them. Activation group 7 activates the gyro, indicated by this yellow light. And as you saw, the gyro only keeps it stable. It doesn't have any pitch, roll, or yaw authority. Activation group 8 is the reactive thrusters. You can shut them down if you want. I use them sometimes if I want to practice simulate landing an Orca without reactive thrusters or without a gyro and stuff like that. A little more realistic approach. So that's regarding the activation groups and how I basically control the Orca. Another indicator that you'll have here is your landing gear. You'll see the landing gear pretty much as they're situated on the Orca, and they're green, and when they're up they're going to be red, and little to red circles to indicate that you don't have landing gear. Now the landing gear don't go all the way into the body of the Orca because except for the little, well, globes and landing gear, everything, all the rest of it is set to have no collision, but these are set to do have collision so I can land on other players' creations and things like that when we're playing in multiplayer. My other Orcas did not have collision on this, and when I landed, it'll just go through their body and land straight on the stomach. You'll also notice that the Orca has two very little landing gears right here on the tail, and that is to prevent tail striking. Just to have a little more safety. And as I said, she has a fully articulated tail, so you can fly it using that most of the time, specifically when you're hovering. Now picking her up, I'm going to set my engines 90 degrees down using that white line as an indicator. I'm going to turn on my gyro because it's going to make life just a lot easier. And I'm going to start increasing my throttle all the way to 13-14%. 13% should bring her up and hold her at about a hover in which altitude that you want. Just be careful because unlike helicopters that you set your collective to a specific altitude, in VTOLs they will hover pretty much using the same force, and it might even require less force the higher up you are. So just be mindful of that. So that's regarding that. Now moving to forward flight and flying around, let's bring up our landing gear. Moving forward and things like this, you can use the VTOL to push it a little forward, and then you can start moving at slower speeds and things like that. And as I said, you can use, once you set that up to the angle that you want, you can use the trim to give it extra 45 degrees pointing forward and slow it down. Just remember that you might need to increase or reduce your throttle according to what you're trying to do. Now the negative 10 degrees, and I'm going to need to shut down my gyro for that, is to have the ability to basically hover pointing my nose down. So I can hover while looking down, and if I use it with my trim, I can really almost look 90 degrees down, as you can see. Fly backwards or basically just fly with her nose down. Let's bring it back to 90 degrees, prevent it from falling. So that's the basics of that. Turn on the gyro to have stability, and as you will see, it is very stable in the gyro. The reactive thrusters, however, will override the gyro stability. They'll have much more power than what the gyro can handle. So be mindful of that as well. She's not an easy aircraft to fly, but she's very, very stable and maneuverable when you get the hang of her. So now I'm going to switch off my gyro as we're approaching 50, 60 miles an hour. I'm not touching my controls. I'm going to move my throttle just a bit forward, increase throttle. I'm not touching my pitch or roll or anything. She's without a gyro. She's just flying now and under her own aerodynamic shape, basically. If you want to go to full power, you can move your VTOL controls all the way up and increase throttle all the way up. I highly recommend doing it simultaneously. It'll prevent the nose from sending you into the ground. What you will notice is that my nose is pitching down. If I let go of the controls, it starts pitching down. So I use my VTOL to adjust my engine angle to increase or decrease pitch trim. That way I can control it in forward flight. In my videos, you'll notice that the Orca doesn't use the engines in fully horizontal. They're always a bit angled down. So looking at my attitude indicator, I can adjust them a little more until I have them set up in a way where I have straightforward flight. It also works upside down. I can increase them all the way up, just the opposite of what I did, and basically have it completely stable as I'm flying. Now in forward flight, I can, like I said, I can shut down my reactive thrusters. You don't really need them in forward flight. It's very maneuverable. The fully articulated tail gives you great authority. Just be careful not to use yaw, because if you use yaw, this is what's going to happen. It's going to roll in the opposite direction of your yaw indicator, of your yaw input, and send you into I forget the name of it, a snap roll. There you go. It's when you use your rudder basically to snap the roll faster. That's something I might go into the future regarding specific aerial maneuverabilities like an Immelman or split S and other maneuvers like that. Now this Orca does have an afterburner, so activate group 2 activates the afterburner, and you'll see the speed starting to climb, and it's going to get a whole lot louder. But we don't really need it, so I'm going to shut it back down. Sorry for that shaking, that was because of my inputs. Now as we're coming back to a landing, reduce your throttle all the way to about 40, 39. Put your engine pylons in the direction that you want. Make sure that you have group activate 8 activated. That's for the reactive thrusters. You can use the trim control to slow yourself down. You can increase throttle or reduce throttle and bring it back to about 13% for hovering. Now it's going a bit wild, so I'm going to activate the gyro. That's going to give me better stability. Down with the landing gear. And let's bring her down to a landing. And there you go, right here on this little cube. Now I will upload this specific Orca as unlisted. Oh, went a little backwards. I'm going to upload this specific Orca as unlisted because I have quite a few Orca designs uploaded from the past. I am going to upload an armed version of this because the armed version that I did upload has problem with its landing gear once all the weapons are fired. The only difference between the two is really indicators in the cockpit, and you need a little more throttle because of the weight of the weapon systems. So thank you very much for watching. If you want to fly around this specific Orca, I'll leave a link in the description and also in the comment section in the SimplePlanes video section. Besides that, well, that's about it, I guess. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.